Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Devonish, also known as Coach D. I'm here with my guest host, Matt Young, and today we have an awesome, and I repeat, awesome guest. We have Barbara Lyon-Stewart from the ministry, and a consultant in the ministry. I can't believe we got her on the podcast, for instance here. It's going to be a great show. She's got a lot of knowledge, she's a lot of experience, and I'm looking forward to this chat today. Barb, how you doing?
I'm doing well, very well. Thank you. Thank you for including me today. I'm happy to contribute to your work.
Well, you're going to have a lot to contribute, I feel, today. Just for the audience, can you just give them your backstory? Like, you know, you've done a lot of things for sport, especially in Ontario. Can you, in terms of at the provincial level, can you just give them a little bit of your backstory and your experience and why you're basically at the front of the room?
Okay, so the Reader's Digest version is, my sport was synchronized swimming. I was there forever. I taught high school for 6 years and then just decided I was more tuned to the sport world. So I coached synchronized swimming up to the national level. My favorite coaching experience was in the province of Quebec, where it was my full-time paid job. When I came back from Quebec, I was lucky to get a job as a technical director at a provincial sport organization. I then became the executive director of a provincial sport organization. Also, when I was teaching at high school, I was a president of a provincial sport organization. And working at a sport, one day, a person from the ministry at the government knocked on my door and said, "Barbara, would you be willing to apply for a job working at the ministry in sport?" I'm like, oh, this sounds really cool. It would allow me to get experience with a number of sports. So I applied for the job, I got the job, and I ended up working at the ministry for 19 years. And during the time I was there, I was able to work with probably 50 of the 63 organizations that are funded by the provincial government. I worked in the games unit. I was involved in Canada Games, blah, blah, blah. I left government 2 years ago because I felt that I could make a bigger impact working outside of the government than within government. I can honestly say I probably was not the best civil servant in the world because my focus was on sport and it was not on the government side of it so much. So I'm like, time to get out. So I now have contracts with some sports that endorse the method that I think is important for sport, that they're sophisticated, that they're open to new learning. The criteria to be in the group of sports that I have is you need to fully engage, your staff need to fully engage. We have regular meetings of executive directors, technical directors, social media people, event people, club development people, and anything else that kind of triggers in my mind as this would be a good thing or something to do. And as I say, as long as people engage fully, they stay. If people fall off the sophistication route or they don't fully engage, peace out, goodbye, you're done, and thank you, have a nice life. Or if any of the boards are stupid enough to fire the staff, they're done with me that day. That's my sport background.
Wow.
Well, time is short.
That's why you're at the front of the room. Matt, what do you think?
I mean, listen, Daryl, Barb's one of my favorite people. We met a couple of years ago, and when I heard what she was doing, I was immediately drawn to supporting and helping in any way that we could and providing value. And what I like is, the unbelievable breadth of experience that Barb brings to the administration and management side of sport, where, as we've talked about before on previous podcasts, is a big opportunity for a lot of organizations. So I can't wait to dive in to a little bit about what Barb, what you see and what you've seen as some of the biggest gaps that exist and some of the biggest opportunities, obviously, that can come from those gaps. But I do want to say something in that we hear this all the time, and you said it at the beginning of this, the beginning of your podcast in the introduction. Lots of people feel that they can be more effective outside of the government kind of constraints rather than inside the government constraints. I hear that all the time, particularly in sports. Why do you feel that that's an overriding statement or sentiment that comes from a lot of people in sport? And should it be something that government or the political nature of sport should be considering looking at changing, so that these great people like yourself, like others, don't feel the need to have to leave to go outside of the system to then better the system? So I guess kind of twofold questions there.
Okay, well, the first thing is, a lot of the people that become politicians were the last person selected on a team. That's been my experience. They were not involved in sport. They were the last one picked on the team, or they weren't picked, or they were in the chess club, or they were in the political club. So they really don't understand sport. They don't understand the benefits of sport, and they don't understand the urgency of sport. Every time something doesn't happen quickly, a child or an athlete loses a year of training, a coach uses a year of development. So for them to constantly be taking forever to do anything, it's just far too frustrating. So at least outside of sport, outside of government, you've got an opportunity to go in new directions and do it quickly. Like you and I have done, Matt. You get a good idea, you think about a new podcast, a new group you want to work with, a new lesson to learn, make it happen next week. It doesn't have to be dragging on forever and forever. The second part is with the gap, I don't think that people understand at the government level or often at the sport, either PSO or club level, that you've got to have just as sophisticated a business side of the sport as a technical side. If you don't have a strong business structure, a strong foundation, then you're just always going to be at a disadvantage. And too many people, they're only working on one side and not the other.
Yeah, super good point. And we've talked about that in previous podcasts. We heard about that from Gene Smith, athletic director from Ohio State. We heard that from Mike O'Donnell, senior director of player development at the PGA of America. You've said the same thing. And we keep running into this, and I totally agree. And Daryl and I talk about this all the time. Sport is a business. And it seems very foreign to me and to us that you would elect somebody to participate in sport that doesn't have that business background. And you're right, because that creates a lot of confusion. It stalls progress. And if you're not in business and you don't have that business experience, you forget that you're in the business of customer service. And if you don't service and figure out who that customer is and what they want, and that goes to your point of everything taking a year and 2 years and 5 years to get off the ground, you've lost that customer. And I really like what you said. Listen, kids are only 9 once. They don't get the chance to be 9 twice. They're 9 once. And that sport experience, if it's not spot on, it's, as the stats are showing us, there's too much miss in the hit and miss. So I really like what you said about that. A footnote, I said to Daryl, I go, you better watch it, because we're going to get the question. We're going to get the direct answers to the questions that we're asking today.
Well, the other thing is, too many people go on boards, either for provincial organizations or for clubs, because they love their sport. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're any darn good at being people that are supposed to be driving that sport, because too many of them have a conflict of interest. They go on because they think it's going to benefit their child in some way, or they think they know better than the people that are currently there, and they don't really bring a specific skill set to the board that's needed, but they just love their sport. Can I give one example?
Sure, of
course. So one of the sports I work with, large provincial sport organization, and I work with them for quite a long time. And they got themselves with an executive director who made some inappropriate choices. They ended up with significant deficit. So that executive director was moved along, but at the next AGM I was there, and after they asked me to come in and talk to them, to the new board after the AGM, and they had just done their elections, and I said, so which of the people in this room have the strong financial background? Because as much as that executive director made errors, where was the finance committee? Where was the questions at the board level? Where was the financial experience to go, read the darn audit, which showed that they were in trouble, like put the brakes on some of the decisions. 3 or 4 new people were brought on the board. None of them had financial background at all. And I'm like, people, what is wrong with you? Like, how do you expect this to change? If you can't even see that's where your gap is and you don't address it, but you all love your sport. Nuts. That's just crazy.
Just for our audience, Barb, can you explain the role of the Provincial Sport Organization as the ministry and the difference between that and the National Sport Organization? Like, can you just for our audience, just so they know
Okay.
who's doing what or what's their role? Because
So,
I don't think people know what their role is.
well, yeah, you're right. They don't. That's a whole other podcast. Okay, so Sport Canada determines in Canada who the designated national sport organizations are. And they provide funding to national sport organizations. The national sport organizations, they have one sport organization per sport in the province. So like we've got one provincial sport organization designated for football, baseball, hockey, whatever. So there's only one. So it's like the pyramid. And with the long-term athlete development system we have, with policies, protocols, there's supposed to be system alignment that goes right down to the club level. So the clubs join the provincial sport organization, the provincial association aligns with the national organization. Does that help?
So
Yeah.
Barb, do we need as many, are there too many tiers? Is there too many boards of directors? Is there too many, cooks in the kitchen? Is there too many hands in the cookie jar? Is that the issue? Is it even possible in Canada's system to get that organizational alignment that we're looking for when there's so many different boards and tiers and thoughts and ideas on how sports should be adjudicated?
I think that the number we have is reasonable because the number of national organizations aligns with basically who's on the Olympic list. That really is, the Olympic sports are mostly on that list. I think the problems get to be at the provincial level. In Ontario, they only align with sports that have got national sport organizations because they want that alignment. I think often the problems at the club level, there's too many clubs. Like in one sport, like in Sudbury, there can be 7 clubs in one sport. Or in volleyball or in basketball, you might get a parent who's not happy with what the team is doing. So they go rent their own gym because they want their own way of doing things. Right. And then they try to get a board. Like, I think it's much more of even if they did more like in business, you can have one club and a bunch of satellites. But one board is making the decision. One head coach is driving how the athlete development is going. The fundraising, like all of that, even to try and get corporate sponsorship in their community would be much bigger. But these small organizations, like I think it's more at the club level, but that's a history. And for some people, we've had this club, we've had it forever. We're going to have it until we take our last breath. And I think that's where the problems are. And some of them, even for the parents, how do you go on a website and go, okay, my child's goal might be to go to the Canada Games. Well, how do I know by going to that club that they've got coaches with the level of sophistication to get my child to a point where they can try out to make that team? How do they know that? So people have tried doing gold medal profiles of clubs, gold medal standards, but it's a complicated process. And for the parent, how the heck do they know? Right. That's the challenge. I don't think we got strong enough alignment with the school system to better educate the parents. Like I think that every time, I think the school boards, or maybe there needs to be on the professional development day for coaches, many more presentations made by sport people to explain the system to them, because that's the conduit to the parents. Right?
Right. And that, yeah. And Daryl brought up a good point when he asked that. I mean, he's right. There's a lot of parents have no idea how this system is aligned or not aligned, and therefore then you just end up going by, oh, I got to do this because Jill, Johnny, and Jenny are over there. They're doing that, so we should be doing that. Versus like, how does this actually work? So Barbara, whose responsibility ultimately does that fall on? Or is there one entity that it falls on, or is it all our responsibility? It seems like we don't even have a minister of sport at present. So, you've got a reported $7.8 billion a year business. Everyone complaining that there's no money. Well, where's that $7.8 billion going? It's going everywhere except for the consumer and reinvesting in the development. Who's ultimately responsible for reining this in?
Well, I mean, Sport Canada obviously is the leadership. They're supposed to be providing the leadership. They want system alignment. But as my example, unless things have changed significantly, the last time Sport Canada put out their policy for how sport was supposed to go, ending in 2022, they didn't even use the word Provincial Sport Organization. They talked about municipalities. They talked about clubs. I'm like, you don't even understand your own system. And to me, municipalities, I think there's also a clear differentiation between recreation and sport. Recreation, everyone should be able to do, and I think it should be run by municipalities. But sport is expensive, and I don't care what sport it is. The difference between sport and recreation is the expense of it. And by the time you get into sport, even at entry levels, that means the parents need 2 cars because they need to get the kid to his practice or someone's going to work. They need to be able to allow the kids to not do babysitting, part-time jobs, whatever, because it might conflict with their schedule. But if you want to do sport, it costs money. If you want to do recreation and have children have lots of opportunities, the municipalities should be stepping up because provincial sport organizations can't do everything. Right? I also think that I've been a big proponent, and okay, this is kind of funny, try not to laugh too hard, but for about 4 or 5 years in Ontario, I had to file for all of the combative sports. So kickboxing, Muay Thai, Wushu, all of those. I was their main person. Absolutely love the file. Learned a huge amount. I was at the first MMA event that sitting ringside that they did at the Air Canada Centre. I would never do the sport, but I totally value what they do, their commitment to it, their business side of it, the whole darn thing. But they became much better about, I learned from one of them, not accepting member clubs. When you join our association, you must abide by these policies. And if you don't, your membership will not be renewed. You're done. So whether it has to do with concussion protocols, or in this case, COVID protocols, or safety of athletes in any way, or whatever their policies are, you follow the damn policies or you're done. And I learned from a really smart lawyer, don't drop them partway through the year. Just send them a letter of warning and then don't renew them. Because I don't know about other provinces, but we can spend a lot of money on lawyers with, when they remove a club. But it's like for a provincial sport organization, it's all about risk. And for boards, it's about risk. Do not take member clubs that are not going to abide by your policies because they are a risk for your organization. And we all know that insurance is really guiding a lot of the decision and programming and what's happening. If they want to find a way to not have to pay a claim, the first thing they're going to look at is, where's your membership policies? What did they agree to? Did they understand what they were agreeing to? Did they check off the box? Blah, blah, blah. And if they didn't, you're the one that's put yourself at risk. So that's where I'm saying the business side or the governance side needs to be equally as strong as the technical side. Just one other thing in that too about the clubs I learned from Matt is when he talked about how coaches should do a preseason interview discussion checklist to find out what the parent and the child wanted, and then at Christmas time and at the end of the year. To my thoughts, when parents do that interview, by the time they get to December, if that coach hasn't produced, goodbye. Like, don't keep giving them chances because they may have aspirations in individual sports where it's usually their full-time paid job. Their aspiration could be just to fill their rink or to fill their ski lift or to fill whatever. So that not necessarily that they're even attuned enough to know, I've taken your child as far as I can, and I'm now going to send them to Matt because I've taken them as far as they have. Like, parents need to learn to be much better consumers. But when it comes to, like, they're paying a lot of money. I don't understand why they just don't step in sooner. And if you wait till the end of the season and they haven't achieved what they wanted to, the likelihood is the child will quit or his buddies will quit because a bunch of them aren't happy. And I know in Ontario, we're particularly bad at tracking current numbers, but not good at when people leave. I'm like, okay, so we're keeping the rinks full, we're keeping the swimming pools full, but the numbers are not going up. So that just means we're replacing people. But why did they leave? And what did that coach do wrong? Or what did that club do wrong? Or what lesson could they have all learned that that kid would have found whatever it was in December, a different way of approaching them, a different manner of speaking to them, so that then when they, at the end of the season, the kid's like, oh my gosh, I was slow to start in the fall, but look where I went. Instead of, well, there's a year I've lost.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, wow,
Consumers.
so many good points there. I don't even know where to start, but I'm on page with you in terms of the attract, retain, and growth metrics. If we're not, you know, we spend so much time and energy attract, coming in the front door, leaving the back door, because once they're there, we're not retaining them. And Barb, you've made some really good points about how to do that. And, you know, the pushback is, well, Barb, we can't fire a coach halfway through the season because how are we going to replace them? Who are we going to replace them with? And when we hear that kind of response to it, that also confirms that you haven't done a good job of building your cache of coaches. You haven't done a good job at the beginning of the system. If you're always beholden to the fear of losing people, and like you said, what's going to happen is you're going to lose way more people in the long term than if you just cut the snake off at the head and replace that person with somebody of quality caliber, you know, during that. So I really like that, you know, the attract, retain, and growth metrics. I'm shocked at how few people know. And again, I think this boils back to your point about business and just not having that business acumen to understand this is your responsibility. Your attract, retain, and growth metrics are your measure, just like a young boy or girl's development metrics are their measure of success. I think that's a great point that you brought up, and I'd love to see more attention put there in helping organizations and administrators and volunteers, you know, move off the excuse, well, I'm just a volunteer, you know, I'm doing the best I can, into okay, well, you cannot, as a coach, step in front of young men and women until you've got this course. And this course doesn't have to be a Coaching Association of Canada 50-hour a week, you got your own locker and you have to commit to a part-time job. But it also can't be the Nike USOPC, you know, 2-minute video on how to coach kids. There's got to be something in between that works better than what we're doing right now to give back to the consumer. Because as
people just also understand their rights. So this is a sidebar I forgot to bring in from my coaching experience. I also, for about 4 years, worked as a labor coach when babies were born. And I had a contract with a partner, and we worked through U of T on a study that we did. And I'll never forget one birth I was at. The woman's labor was going well. And then every time the doctor came in the room, the baby's heart rate went up. So the doctor came in the room. I didn't like the doctor, was really gruff with her, was not particularly the right person associated with her. So we put her back in bed, put the monitor on. Then he'd leave, and then it would go, she would be totally fine. Went back and forth like this. So finally I said to the husband, have you figured out yet what's going on here? And he says, no, because of course he's terrified, right? And me with my mouth, I didn't care. I'm like, you're paying me. I'm going to tell you what I suggest. Do it, don't do it. I'm just going to tell you. So I said, do you like that doctor? No. I said, your wife clearly doesn't, because every time he comes in, he's gruff and grumpy and he upsets her. I said, what would you do if a garage mechanic spoke that way to your wife? He said, I'd fire her. I said, then fire the damn doctor. She's in labor. He's like, really? I'm like, watch what it's doing to her. Do you want this to be your experience? How many children do you plan to have? Long story short, He went out and he fired him. He said, what will they do? So I guarantee you, they will bring you the nicest doctor in the hospital because they don't want word getting out that their people are unhappy or that it's having adverse effects on the doctor. So what do? They bring in this other doctor. He's got a big giant bum. He puts himself in the chair. He talks to her. He calms her down. They take the monitors off. She ends up having totally natural childbirth because I was one of those, like not having drugs, medication, if you can avoid all of it, went on to have a wonderful birth. I said to the husband, it's your job to protect your wife. If you don't like the doctor, fire the damn doctor. To me, it's a no-brainer. You can fire a doctor, you can fire just about anybody.
So quick question, and I'll let you go. So listening to you talk, Barb, it sounds like there's a leadership problem. It sounds like there's an alignment problem. Where do you come in as a consultant? Like, where do you start? Like, it sounds like you got to start from the beginning and go top down, but what's your role and how do you approach these guys if you're consulting them? Because it sounds like you need to blow the whole thing up.
Well, you've got to understand that the sports I currently work with, I had worked with when I was in the government. So I'd already invested in them for a substantial period of time. So with me, this is my being square or whatever. It starts with bylaws. People need to understand that your bylaws are not suggestions, they're mandatory requirements. So as part of your bylaws, you have incorporation. As part of your incorporation, you've got clearly defined objectives and a vision and a mission. And you start by having those. You make sure a good lawyer approves them, which helps you to create a board to understand this is our framework, this is our role and responsibility, and then separate what will be the role or responsibility of a senior coach, a head coach, a technical director, the person that you hire. And being very clear that in my mind, boards of directors should be for policy development and that the operational stuff should be with paid staff. You start with that framework.
And that's what you go in and you set that up already with your Ontario group.
Yeah, like with all the sports that I have, I've worked with them for years. I mean, I have a sport right now that I dropped 2 weeks ago because in the middle of COVID, they fired all of their staff because they thought they could save money, wanted to go in a new direction. They had been hoodwinked by some parents who thought they could do better. I'd worked at that association since 2004, and I refunded their money, and my check said, I wish you the best of luck because you're really going to need it. And now, unfortunately, I'm going to watch them crash and burn. It's going to be a very big sport in Ontario that's going to self-destruct because they've got a bunch of parents that thought, well, we can save this money, we can do better. And if to start it off, they're going to end up losing any surplus they have because they didn't fire the people with good legal advice. And now they're going to lose any money and more that they had pulled together. Like provincial sport organizations and clubs are fragile. And I don't think people realize that. They're very, very fragile. It just takes a few people that don't understand. Bylaws they're legal documents. They're a legal obligation. They're not suggestions to pick and choose with. The same as all the coaching programs that Matt talks about, or the things you do with concussion strategies, whatever. It's why you've got to get boards that have got some people with business experience on it. Because when you don't, it's like when you great coach and that really great coach leaves and you just watch sports fall apart. It's heartbreaking, but people just keep doing it to themselves over and over again.
Wow. So you didn't have any business background. You were a teacher, but you knew enough to know that you didn't know this and you needed someone to come in and do this.
Well, I knew that I was lucky. I was president of a provincial sport organization when I was 32. And I learned a tremendous amount from that. And I was in a sport where there was a lot of lawsuits. People sued each other a lot. So I was really lucky. I had smart people on the board. I learned a lot from the lawyers I work with because when you're constantly dealing with those, and I learned that words matter. Words matter. Whether it's a contract, an agreement, your bylaws, your policies, words matter. Like in Ontario right now, the recent document that government came out with, it was full of contradictions. All of the stuff in the COVID stuff, it's got too many contradictions. So in one version, they talked about prolonged contact. And another one, they talked about contact. Like they didn't even use consistent wording. Well, when you're a coach or you're a club trying to come up with return to play protocols, that word prolonged means a lot. So who dropped it? Who was the person that didn't realize it mattered? Who were the people that didn't look at it to know words matter? So that was the biggest thing I learned, was from being a president of an organization. And then I just knew that I was much more of that, trying to see the business side, and you don't have a strong foundation. And if you've got a strong foundation, that also means you've got money, you can attract good coaches, you can keep good coaches, and your sport will just continue to grow because you've got that good foundation. But sometimes you can get parents with a total conflict of interest that come on with the wrong intention. And if you don't, for example, have a good conflict of interest policy, like some parents should never even made the nomination phase. Like get a nomination committee together. Let them to choose a slate of people to be the board of a club or of a provincial sport organization, because they have the skill set needed at that time. So that could be an HR person because you're doing some different hiring, a change management person because you've decided to go from developmental to more high performance. Like you need to get the skill sets, and then vote in a slate of people with the skill set. And then 2 or 3 years later, as you circulate people in, you might need a social media person, you might need a finance person. Like you need to be aware of what your needs are. But stop just getting people that love the sport. It's just crackers.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And when we sit in AGMs and we listen to people say, hey, we need this position in the board, who wants to do that? And someone puts up their hand, they're, oh, okay, Barb, you're fine. No financial experience whatsoever. I agree with you, Barb. And you know, one of the solutions to that, and we've had these conversations with communities and associations, is you have access to a lot of people in the community, not a lot of many who are going to come to your AGM. Don't just pick the people that are sitting in the AGM, because those are often the people with their own interests, with the special thing. Go and be intentional. If I know that Barb has a background in financing or accounting, that's who I am targeting. So I am going to be vigilant and diligent, because as we all know, ask a busy person to get something done, they get it done immediately. Ask somebody who's just sitting around and it takes forever. So I agree with you at that point, and it's such a huge point. I want our audience to hear that again. You know, we need to move away from the who's got the strongest heartbeat and who's got the greatest pom-poms to fulfill positions, because this matters. It's really important. And you gave a lot of, you know, your doctor example is a great example. I just can't for the life of me understand, you know, why we have coaches that don't go through a very good coach curriculum before they step on the pitch, ice, regardless of any level. And particularly, it should be even more important at the lower levels, at the participation levels, to have great experiences, not less important. So I really like that point that you made, Barb, because we really do need to take a good look at, your other point, parents are paying for this. We paid $100,000 over our child's hockey experience, which by and large was a crap experience. And it had nothing to do with just the coaches, and it was the culture of the organization that we were in. You know, we didn't want to take him out to go to the private club route because to him it was his friends. He didn't actually know how bad the experience was, because we did our job as parents and said, you know, it's not what the experience is, it's what you make it. So, but for so many people, it's just not that way. So I really like that point, Barb. It's a really important point. I want our audience to think about that, you know, in making decisions. If you're a part of an organization, know who is running that organization. Do not elect somebody based on what kind of car they drive, or how good of hockey player or a soccer player or former basketball player they may or may not have been. It's, do they have business experience? Do they have the experience in the areas that you need? And the last point that I want to echo, because I think it's so important, get people for the gaps that you have in your organization. If you don't have a good marketing and communications person, well, seek that out. If you need social media, well, go get that. Don't just have one person wearing 5 hats and be terrible at all of them. I totally agree. Daryl?
Yep.
Wow. You know what? This goes along with where we see sport is dying. Like we have a broken system and people are going to go away from sport. I think Barbie said it best. We need to decipher between recreation and sport because it's so expensive. People just think sport. They don't understand that word recreation, that they don't know if it even exists. So they're like, well, my kid's not playing sport because it's too expensive. So they don't even bother anymore. And they almost try and avoid it now at the lower levels where it's like, I hope my kid doesn't like sports or doesn't want to do anything sport related because I don't want to be in that world or we can't afford it. So they discourage it. And I've seen parents do this where kid wants to learn how to play hockey or skate and they don't let him skate. They defer. So they think, okay, if I wait long enough, it'll be too late for him to want to play hockey and it'll discourage him. So, you know, I guess my next question is, Barb, with all this experience, all you've seen, how can we fix this broken system? Or I don't want to say how can we fix it, but what's your advice when you're talking to these NSOs and PSOs right now? What advice do you give these guys, or when you're consulting them? Is it, do you start with the framework? Do you start with the structure? Do you say we got to start from the beginning? What do you do?
Well, I think that's people get excited every 2 years when the Olympics come, right? Like right now, I noticed yesterday that they posted all the new clothes that are going to be out for Team Canada going to Tokyo. So I think it's not enough that people get excited every 2 years about sport and start waving the flag and national pride and all of that. Like, we need to be a country where being fit, being engaged in sport becomes much more common in our lifestyle. It really concerns me that parents are going to use COVID as a reason to take their child out of sport and keep them out of sport, because they're going to say it's too safe, it's too dangerous, it's unsafe, I want you to stay home, I want you in the bubble. Like, I wish right now that all the government, provincial, federal, whatever, were out there saying about the importance of getting your child re-engaged, assuring them that all the provinces are working on safe protocols to get them back to engage, whether it's using social distancing, by just doing fitness right now, by just doing skill development, but getting them out of the house, getting them into an environment where they can become empowered, not feel like they're just having to cower at home, because I know all the sports are working to do that. I know the strategies are there. I hope we never have to take a step back. But for right now, a lot of time, money, and excellence from really smart people is making a safe environment. But if the world doesn't know that Canada's working hard to do that, because there's nothing that's educating parents to know that, they're going to go, hot damn, I'm going to save my $20,000 because we're not going to go skiing or golfing or tennis or whatever, and we're just going to safely stay home. And they'll reassure their child that, maybe next year they'll do it again, but by then the kids have found other ways of entertaining themselves and the damage is done. Because we talk about this, even
Absolutely.
some of the points that Matt and you were making is, it's even worse for girls. Too often in the household, it's either limited amount of money and dad wants his son to play hockey, or it's a limited amount of money and the sons are given priority of time over what the daughters are doing. And for sure it is for women getting involved as administrators or even officials.
Right.
They're the ones that are driving the kids or making dinner or helping with the homework. Like, how are we going to educate these dads that their daughters, it is critical to their long-term health, to the hopefully young children they'll produce, to the spirit they have in themselves, that dads encourage their daughters to become much more engaged in sport at a higher level as they're comfortable with or suits their need or whatever. Because I don't think it's moms. I think it's going to be dads that are going to make that happen. Because that's one area, no matter how much money has ever been spent, and I'm talking my entire experience in sport, in special programs to engage girls and women in sport, there's never been an increase. You can look at the statistics, it's never happened. So to me, I'm like, okay, we got to find ways of getting dads engaged, getting moms on boards, like looking at some different ways of just engaging. And if all we can do is sport by sport, you guys know I'll do it, whatever I can to help you to get that message out there. But we got to get women and girls in sport. We got to get dads to make it happen. And we can't let this time of COVID put us even further back. It's just heartbreaking to think of what it could do. And I value kids that take dance. I value kids that take piano. I think that dance is an amazing physical outlet. I would feel the same about getting children out to dance classes. Get kids out, get them active. Where's the promotion for that? Where's the company that's willing to say, you know, they're going to get behind all of this? Because maybe you guys are where you live. Matt, are you seeing things in BC? I'm not seeing it here.
Nothing. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, no. And those are two really good points. And I like what you said. It's we need to move beyond the campaign. And Daryl and I have talked about this ad nausea. Campaigns don't change behavior. Behavior change is, as you said, Barbara, education and mentorship. And we need that education and mentorship to be a lot more intentional and a lot more targeted than just the camp. Well, girls play. We need girls to play. Okay, thanks. We know that. You know, what's the next step? How can we actually action that and activate that? And that's where we come from. That's where we need a lot more leadership and mentorship, like you said, Barbara, and being targeted with that message and showing the results, quite frankly. And number two,
if we've got kids in the wrong sport, move them. Like maybe they're not a great hockey player, or maybe they would prefer individual sport. Like dad played hockey, so the kid goes in hockey. But maybe they're more of an individual sport person. Let's not lose a good athlete that should be doing speed skating. Yeah. Like let's find ways, not losing athletes, like how do we coordinate them better to say, or how many really great hockey players are great golfers? Like what's the coordination that you put down the hockey stick and in the summer you go and play golf? And maybe it's not great golf. Maybe you need to make it much more of a team building thing where yes, they work on coordination. Yes, they work on whatever, but to keep the kid engaged in a similar sport, but we lose them. We don't get the hockey player that goes like all the upper body strength he has. Maybe they would be great in bobsleigh. But we just lose good athletes because we don't even know where kids have left or why they've left. They're just gone. How does that make you feel? Well, thank you. I've been in a sport. My parents have paid $100,000. They're gone and nobody even cares. Like that's pretty sad as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, you don't hear about that because after your kids have been put through the system that everyone's trying to warn you about, it's not like parents are coming out and going, oh, hey, I fell for that. It was a crappy experience. I'm a fool. And we don't get that. We don't get that feedback loop from the parents who are already out of it. They're just out of it and gone and go, and then we hear the horror stories later. It's a good point.
Thank you, Matt, to tell me about it, though. I'm at an advantage because Matt's gone through it with his kids. I went through later. My kids are a little younger, and Matt's given me a lot of great suggestions, advice. So again, this is what has to come down. It's got to be funneled down. Education and mentorship, as Matt said, and as you said, Barb, is the only way we're going to change what's happening presently.
Well, and isn't that onboarding? Like a lot of the things that Matt's talked about with your C's, like it can't just be hire a coach and, well, I've hired you so you know what you're doing. Like what's the onboarding process once they engage in the sport, that they get ongoing education, ongoing learning, ongoing expectations, whether you're a paid person or a volunteer person. Because I even tested a few people. I'm like, okay, I'm really lucky because a lot of people support the work that I do just by engaging. So I've got a great sports psychologist in Dr. Judy Goss. She's amazing, works with Canada's Olympians and in a number of sports. And so I said this to someone coaching AAA hockey, 12-year-olds, whatever. So I've got this really good connection. And I think it might be someone that you should consider coming to do a talk with your parents. Give them some things of how, Matt's whole thing about not talking in the car, what to say, not okay. Oh no, that could take up a practice. And how would we get people to that? And I'm just like, you're an idiot. Peace out, I'm done. Like they couldn't even see sports psych is important. Like my tolerance with people that just don't get the bigger picture, it just gets smaller and smaller. Like we would have been, oh my God, that's great. When can we do it? How many sessions can we do? We'd have been on board with that. But this little tunnel vision, I'm gonna lose a practice, really? Like the parents might not be interested. To me, it should be a mandatory requirement to be part of the team. We have to support each other. We don't want you to undermine the coach. We want you to engage. How is that not a no-brainer? They didn't do it. I'm just like, you're an idiot.
Yeah, proactive. You know what? I wasn't worried about you not expressing how you felt today at all. And it's refreshing, and it's really, quite frankly, it's what's needed. Someone with your experience, you've seen it, you've done it at all the levels. You're not just coming in and talking the talk, on the talk circuit. You're not just giving this information to organizations to monetize and make money for yourself. Hey, listen, if you're not listening and you're not abiding by the rules, you're out of here, which is refreshing, because that's the accountability that Daryl and I talk about is missing from a lot of our conversations and a lot of our interactions with sport organizations. So thank you so much for doing that. We're coming up to the last bit here. Daryl and I always like to leave with the first steps. So any pearls of wisdom that you have, Barb, and I know we've talked about a lot of different things. So maybe something for an organization, something for a parent to consider, something for an athlete to consider, whatever you want. What are some good, simple first steps that our listeners can take to make sure they're having a better sport experience based on the conversation we just had?
I think you need to I'm a really big one for journaling. I know the intention of what it is that I want. And every year I try and think of some key phrases. So for me, one right now I'm working with a group and my key phrase is, you need to be driven. You need urgency, you got a short time frame. So what is it you want to accomplish in that time? So whether you're a parent, a club administrator, or a coach, what one or two things can you focus on right now that are going to make you happier in what you're doing and you more engaged? Because I think it's infectious. I think the people that have a good plan and they stick to the plan, but it's small sound bites, but it's all about emotional well-being. And get bylaws, get policies. They're so readily available. Get them, stick to them. And if people don't want to be part of your plan, kick them to the curb. Be good consumers and see urgency. Children don't have forever. Parents don't have forever. We don't have time to waste. Is there anything more you want me to say on that?
Amazing. Drop the mic is right, Matt.
Yeah.
Barb, so refreshing to have you on. And as Matt said, you've been in the trenches, you've been at the top, you've gone through the whole thing. So the view you're giving us is not a view that not everyone gets to see. So that's why it was awesome to have you on today. With that knowledge, I hope people, the listeners out there today, have a better understanding of the structure of the provincial sports organization and the national, and what needs to be done on their part to create quality sports experiences for everyone. Matt, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I really first of all, Barb, thanks a lot for coming on and thanks for the work that you do. I agree. I just want to echo Daryl. This is someone as an athlete. You competed as an athlete, you competed as a coach, you competed as a teacher, you competed as a manager, you competed as you do have that range of experiences that I think more people should be plugging into and listening. I'm always excited when I see people and organizations that go, okay, yeah, Barb, we're in. I'm disappointed when I see organizations that leave or go away. Your comment on success is a system. It's a system, and Daryl and I always say it. The formula for success need not be reinvented. It need be implemented. So we don't need to go for the next best thing, the next shiny object. We're always trying to jump over the dull loony because we see a shiny nickel. It's right there. And like you said, they're in the policies, they're in the manuals. Make yourself a student of the game. I really like that piece of advice for our listeners. It's not $100,000 over 10 years, $10,000 over a year, $2,000 for a year. Think about what you could do with that money you're spending. You're the consumer. You would demand a lot more if you were spending that money anywhere else. Why not demand it for what's happening here in your sport organization?
And
On board slow. Exactly. On board slow, get rid of fast. I agree with that. I hope there is a day where we can see our national sport organizations and our provincial organizations operating with a lot more respect for one another and what each other does, a lot more alignment with what each other does. And like you said, I think that's going to come one organization at a time, one ready organization at a time that just says, hey, wait a second. The better we do at supplying the development level of the funnel with resources, tools, expertise, and knowledge, the better, the more robust and the better the top end of the funnel, and the more people we're keeping in the game by all sense of the equation, not just the high performance athletes, but all the way through. So I really like that. I really hope that that's something that we can continue. And yeah, I appreciate that. I think this was one of my favorite podcasts.
We got to get you back, Barb, one day.
Oh, anytime. And people need to share more, because when I see in my group, the group shares everything. They share policies, they share processes, they share successes, they share challenges, so that people don't feel so alone. Because that's the one thing in the sports sector, a lot of people can't understand the work. You can't just talk to your friends about what you do. But when you can talk to someone that's there and you feel supported, because that's the one thing I've learned. What happens in one PSO today, it's happened in another one, or it's going to happen in another one in 2 years. There's nothing new. It's just everyone goes through it at different times, right? So why not share? Why not be working more cooperatively and openly? Because sharing to me is everything. As fast as you share a good idea, someone else, someone takes it on, you're on to your next better idea. Like, everyone needs to be more open in sharing what they've got. So anything I could do to help, guys, you only need to ask.
Awesome.
On that note, guys, just go play. Thanks for tuning in. Please share this podcast with anyone you think can benefit from this. And again, thanks, Barb, for being here.
My pleasure. Bye, guys.
Bye.